All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. First, we're going to go over some of the things that we had done last time, just kind of to refresh our memory. And hopefully, inshallah, we can get some things, I guess, clarified if they weren't clear enough. So, inshallah, let's do that first. And then let's see. So, last time, we were still on this slide and we talked about marriage. So we said we're still in the intro, of fiqh of marriage. We didn't really get that deep yet. But today, we will be starting to get really deep into the fiqh side of it. And today is going to be exclusive to proposal and engagement. We may not finish everything in regards to proposal and engagement today. So hopefully, we'll be talking about the different corners of proposal and engagement. We'll be talking about who they're allowed to get engaged to. What does an engagement look like? How much can they see of that woman that they're trying to propose to? Do they have to take her permission? Does the family have to accept this as well? What are the different methods used? Can we use a method like electronic methods, like I don't know, a Skype back in the days, or perhaps maybe today, maybe over Zoom or FaceTime or whatever it is? Can we use electronic methods? Is that permissible? Can we do it without her parents knowing that we're actually in let's say in this chatting, or at least talking to each other without her parents knowing about this? Number 9, we'll also be talking about the other way. Can, let's say, the woman propose to the man and say, hey, I'm interested in getting married to you, come over, whatever it is. Is this permissible at all? And certainly, is it permissible that the father would tell the man that I'm interested in getting my daughter married to you? Does she have to accept? Does she not have to accept? What is the appropriate thing? And of course, all of this is really in order to let us put the foundation of what makes a permissible marriage, what makes a proper marriage, what makes a proper route for marriage. Okay, think of it this way. What is a proper route for marriage? Why are we saying a proper route? Because many times we may be manipulated by our shaitan that we're going towards a certain direction, that it is going towards, let's say, a halal relationship, and then without us realizing, halal wasn't actually the main intention, at least for shaitan, but shaitan was manipulating you that what you're trying to get to was really marriage and not something else. Most of those cases that many Muslim women had fallen into the wrong relationship. They would say, well, I'm trying to find a halal relationship. I'm trying to get married in a halal way and all of these things. And then they end up really getting into the nets of shaitan. So this is extremely important, that we're trying to understand the measurements, the routes, the methods that we would use in order to get into a halal relationship. Okay, so all of this, we're not going to call it restrictions per se, but it's a combination of regulations and restrictions, and certainly advice in order to make things right and not get carried away with different things that will be manipulating ourselves, that will be basically, let's call it a net of shaitan without us realizing. We talked about a number of different issues in regards to the process. We said marriage is a conduct. It is basically a special place, a special relationship, and there are a number of different things that we definitely need to recognize in order to make this, let's call it, a strong bond. Let me just give me a second for back. So we talked about some of the things like culture, let's say really quick, and what we talked about. We talked about a number of different things that may relate to it. We talked about culture influencing. We talked about just different influences out there within family, within certainly within religion, all of these things. We're going to go in details about what is or what are the right qualifications to look for in a potential spouse. So we're going to talk about that in lots of detail. So let's not go into it right now. We also talked about the ruling of marriage in general, and we said that there are differences of opinions. And of course, in regards to marriage, we're basically considering the differences of opinions not as marriage in itself, just the whole issue of marriage, but this is also including the dynamic and certainly the relationship that it basically has on that person. So we have that person, and they may have a circumstance that relates to them but not relate to someone else. So perhaps this person may have a mental issue, this person may have physical issues, this person may have perhaps financial issues that relates to them and not relate to someone else. But because we're talking about a sensitive issue where even physically one person may say, well, I'm dragged to fitna. Another person may say, well, I'm not really, alhamdulillah, I'm not really worried about fitna here. It's not an issue of concern to me, all of that. And I'm capable of studying and I'm capable of doing that. We're talking about a person that is on the neutral stance, on the neutral situation. Here, when we say, okay, is marriage mubah? Is it sunnah? Is it fard? Is it this? Is it that? Okay, we usually speak about this. So we said the Shafi'i madhab. We're going to start with the Shafi'i because they're probably the ones that are, I guess, are the ones. They just said that it was permissible. And when they had said permissible, they basically based it on the ayah when it had praised Prophet Yahya, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, وَسَيِّدًا وَحَصُورًا وَنَبِيًّا مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. And they said, well, Sayyidan is, okay, speaking about a leader here, but il-hasura, they said, is talking about a bachelor, was talking about somebody that had no ability to be in relationship with women. But the other scholars, they rejected that and they said, well, that's a disability and that's not an ability. To not be able, in other words, to have an erectile dysfunction or any type of that kind of a dysfunction is, or even if we're talking about not necessarily this type of a dysfunction, but we're talking about perhaps a dysfunction that affected their fertility. Okay. So we already know that Prophet Zechariah was told that Prophet Yahya would be born, but he would not be capable of making more, let's say, offspring. We already know that piece of it. But is it as a physical disability that he is not capable of having a relationship with women? Or was it a physical disability that disabled him from basically having that fertility? So that's that area of question. And then they debated them by saying, well, how is that even supposed to be a good thing? It would be a good thing if, let's say, somebody had a dysfunction, if they had control over whatever. Let's say if somebody had a desire to women, but despite the desire to women, they basically had controlled their desire. If they controlled their desire, that's what they would be praised for. But if they didn't have the desire for women, they wouldn't be praised for controlling their desire because they don't even have one. Okay. So let's say somebody is blind. Okay, well, this person is blind. And to say, oh, they're always غاضين البصر. Well, of course, by definition, they're always lowering their gaze. right? So you can't praise them for lowering the gaze because they don't have the ability to gaze and even have the need to even lower anything. Who would be praised? The person that has that ability and that has that desire is the one that you would praise. So that was the first opinion, Shafi'i, and that's why they said it was mubah. Remember, mubah basically means that it's permissible. Think of it as, well, I've got a meal, yeah, I can eat it, or I can choose to say thank you. All right. So that was the first opinion, even though the Shafi'iyya were pretty much towards the end of the madhab, because the first madhab was the Hanafi. I love the Hanafi madhab. And one thing about the Hanafi madhab, especially in regards to fiqh of marriage, by the way, they the fiqh of marriage in the Hanafi madhab was probably, if I can say, in terms of on ground, I would probably rate al-Hanafi madhab to containing perhaps the most issues that were discussed. And even if you were to look deep into, let's say, the court system in the Hanafi madhab, you really see that they were living close, and I mean discussing severe cases and discussing severe problems, that they really tackled a lot of issues. And the way they tackled these issues really reflects their intelligence, really reflects their experience. This isn't to say that the other madhab didn't have experience at all, but I would say the Hanafi madhab, I would probably say, stands out in the experiences that they had reflected. We're going to see that down the road, inshallah. We're going to be talking about all madhab. But in terms of a lot of these family problems, I would say Hanafi madhab, you're going to be, really seeing that, how did they think of it? Not to mention that the Hanafi madhab, a lot of times, I would also say, was more inclusive towards women. Okay, hold on. I know I'm not saying the other madhab are misogynist, not at all, but I will say that the Hanafi madhab, maybe because of the area. By the way, so is Maliki. And there are so many issues that I would be I would be just in awe in seeing how the Maliki madhab was really discussing many issues that other madhab did not discuss. We're going to get there, and you're going to see how we thought that these were Western issues, but the Maliki madhab actually went in so much detail. I mean, a lot of detail. Okay. All right. So you understand my voice. But versus the madhab Hanafi, for example, didn't even discuss those issues. But anyhow, so when we speak about the Hanafi madhab in regards to marriage, Hanafi madhab discussed it thoroughly in regards to the ruling of marriage on the different people pertaining to their circumstances. So they talked about the circumstances and differentiated and yes, they considered it as a sunnah in general and said, well, in general, it's a sunnah because that's what all the prophets had done. So when you look at all the prophets, and the Prophet ﷺ had literally said in the hadith, and he said, "An-nikahu min sunnati," that marriage is part of my sunnah. So they said right there, he just said from my sunnah, and you can explain it in a better term. So they said marriage is a sunnah because prophets practiced it, because it would make no sense to say that marriage is just plain mubah, because just plain mubah would also carry by definition that it's just a personal preference and not really something that Islam encourages. When we would say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was encouraging, as basically going with the flow of having, of course, the offspring, marriage, because that's what we would see built in nature. Since this is built in nature, then to embrace what was built within you is basically sunnah. And that's one thing you would see a lot about the Hanafi madhab, is that they would relate logic. And when they study logic, they would look out in the world, they would see nature, they would get the inspiration from the different patterns that they would see, whether in nature or whether in social dynamic, and a number of different things. And they would then display that in understanding logic and understanding just different patterns that would help them see the world based on these patterns in a way that would expand their vision, that would bring about a range. You know, when we say a range of vision, remember this: you could be specialized in one field, but if you carry more than one specialty, you are more likely to be a successful person. If you were, you know, remember that book for Daniel Epstein, and he, not the Epstein, the guy that is, I know it's a Jewish name, but that Epstein guy that with the issue of Trump. No, that's another last name, but the Daniel Epstein is a different guy. He wrote a book, it's called Range. And it was just talking about that the more you go into multiple experiences, let's say you study law and you also studied philosophy and you also studied medicine, and you probably took some classes on biology or whatever it is, that will more likely make you a person that has a wider range of vision and actually see different creative ways that other people within that field, may be specialized and deeply specialized within that field, may not be capable of developing creative ideas or new methods, or even, of course, we're speaking about new experiences that will probably add on to whatever you're going to be writing about. And that's quite interesting, because with al-madhab al-Hanafi, you would always see that influence of studying philosophy was always there. The influences that they had with different cultures, because remember, the Hanafi madhab, most of those that had embraced the Hanafi madhab were not Arab, so they were in close contact with many various cultures. They were in close contact with the Persians, close contact with the Hindus, close contact with, certainly you will see also the Christians. So they really had different cultures that they had not necessarily just debated, but they were also in contact with them to learn the impact of such cultures, the impact of such practices, and what other ways to do it in. This isn't meaning that Islam is da'if, or is poor, or is lacking data or resources to learn how to develop, let's say, solutions to the problems. Not at all. Islam is enough to go back to learn these resources. Islam basically had given us the basis to learn the resources to help us understand Islam without needing to go to all of that. But when it comes to human behavior, we can learn from other resources, or learn from other let's say, specialties or other practices, as long as it does not contradict Islam. Okay, think of it this way. So can we use, let's say, the Western system today in the court system, and say, hey, we're going to benefit from the court system, and this is what the Western system is using. 1, 2, 3, this is what worked, this is what didn't work. The answer is absolutely. There's a lot to learn. Absolutely, there's a lot to learn. And certainly, you know, right now, I used to go to a lot of courts, and I used to go to and participate as as well, they would actually invite me in as a Muslim scholar that would either testify on a certain case or testify against a certain case. Well, when would they call me? They would call me when in the American court system, let's say we're talking about a dispute in marriage and we're talking about the definition of mahr, etc. So I'll give you some of those cases that I participated in. And they had in the marriage contract that she had the right of mahr. Let's say the marriage contract was done in Bangladesh and that she had the mahr by this amount of money. Okay. But of course, the Western system, the American system doesn't know what mahr is. So the lawyer for that case who wants to defend this would invite a Muslim scholar to basically explain mahr to the judge and really see whether she has the right based on American law to ask for the mahr or not. Okay, so I would explain it, and alhamdulillah, by introducing mahr, by introducing a number of different things in Islamic law, alhamdulillah, that we managed to make one mahr as being something that is identified in Ramsey County and Anoka County in alhamdulillah, and be something that, yes, the court itself will consider that is something that they would register as legal and register as part of what women have the right to ask for, and that it is not against the law. Okay, because dowry is against the law. We'll talk about that later. Dowry is what a woman would pay the man for marriage, but mahr is what a man would pay for the woman in marriage. Dowry is illegal in the US, mahr is not, or at least mahr is not in certain counties. So then you would have to invite, a Muslim scholar from the masjid or from an Islamic institution to perhaps explain it to that judge in order to then rule whether this is legal based on their terms or not. Okay, now when you look at the system today in court system, definitely it's okay and definitely permissible to use the different methods as long as they don't contradict Islam is definitely permissible. And like we said, al-hikmah, wisdom is dallatul mu'min. Wisdom is basically the treasure that a mu'min would find and they would make use of it. It's okay to adopt that and take it from there and use it as long as that doesn't contradict Islam. Okay, so for the Madhab Hanafi as well, another part of their evidence is that they had said, that the Prophet ﷺ had mentioned that لا رهبانية في الإسلام. There is no celibacy in Islam, and therefore when we're speaking about abstaining from marriage, they said, well, if there is no celibacy is when you abstain from marriage, rahbaniyya. Okay, when you abstain from marriage, and since the Prophet ﷺ said, La rahbaniyata fil Islam, that would basically mean that what we need to embrace is the function that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instilled within nature, within men's nature, women's nature, and therefore marriage would be a sunnah. Maliki and Hanbal. Now we're going to be, I guess, going into that area. They agreed a lot with the Hanafi and considered it as a sunnah, but then they also had, I guess, emphasized on the part that if the person is facing fitna, then in that situation it would be obligatory. All right. Let's go and continue with, beyond the ruling, because I think, we want to make sure that we have enough time to say and talk about everything. Okay. So marriage conduct, of course, in Islam, in the Quran, it basically used the word al-mithaq al-ghalidh. Al-mithaq al-ghalidh. There were only two instances that the Quran used the word al-mithaq al-ghalidh as a, let's say, a naming, a labeling, a recognition of calling marriage al-mithaq al-ghalidh. But only two instances. Number one, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taken us upon the prophets a certain promise, that certain promise, that certain will, that certain relationship between the prophets and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to deliver the message. You call that mithaqan ghalidha. And the second time used mithaqan ghalidha is the promise, the bond between the husband and the wife, and that marriage conduct or the marriage contract. Okay, whether you want to call it conduct, you want to call it contract, at the end, it's mithaqan ghalidha. What does the word even mean? The word mithaq actually means a covenant, a contract. We agree on something, and that's mithaq. Ghalidh means bond, means strong, means commitment. Ghalidh means something that is also, think of it as thick. Okay, ghalidh can be thick, ghalidh can be strong, ghalidh can be, let's say, a strong basis. Okay, so when you say mithaq ghalidh, you're talking about a conduct that is mighty, that is founded, that is serious, that is to be taken as a serious matter. Now, of course, we know that in nature that women seek, of course, a mate that has different features than what a man would seek. And we know that a woman, it is part of her nature to seek a partner or a mate. Let's use that one, okay, in nature, okay. She would recognize that she is at least going to be paying a price for intimacy, and that is getting pregnant, and therefore she would seek something that would nest this in her. So she's seeking somebody to give her this empowerment, somebody to give her this preservation, somebody to give her and her babies basically the area of security, and somebody to give her love, because she's going to be busy giving all of that. Now, she may not recognize what exactly she's looking for, but then, of course, you would see there are certain things that are designed in our brains, and our brains would basically work in mysterious ways to let us recognize, just like in animals, we would see that this fish, for example, might actually create this beautiful art that is right in the middle of the sea, and then the girl fish or the female fish would come in to observe this art that this male fish had done, and then she decides whether he is qualified to be the good husband that mostly. So when you look at in nature, you would see whether it's a fish or probably a bird that's probably dancing in a certain way, I guess exposing his abilities, physical abilities, or probably creating a nest to say, hey, see, look at my nest and I could do a good job. And the female would come in and decide whether this is actually reflecting his strength, reflecting his consideration or not, or his hunting skills or whatever it is. At the end, we could see that there's something that is in nature, whether we realize or we don't realize, that it is also built in Allah. It is also built in us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا طَائِرٍ يَطِيرُ بِجَنَاحَيْهِ إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالُكُم. There animals that would walk on earth, or creatures that would walk on earth, and birds that would be flying up in space. Well, I don't mean by space, but up in the skies, or flying in their using their wings, and إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالُكُمْ, but they are nations and creatures that follow, in other words, the same pattern as you. So this is not saying, when we're taking the inspiration or taking and studying animals, this is not at all saying that, in any way agreeing with evolution, but this is actually saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us that we can study human behavior by also looking at animal behavior as well. Studying animal behavior gives us an idea about our own selves. Studying human behavior also gives us an idea to study animal behavior as well, that there's a special communication, that there is a certain function, that whether we're speaking about how mating happens, how basically all of that recognition, what females look for, what males look for, all of that is basically right there, grounded in our brain, grounded in our bodies, whether we realized it or not. And certainly within that, Islam basically comes to tell us and let us recognize that, okay, what's going on here? Okay, let's us recognize that al-mithaq al-ghalidh is basically a conduct that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had considered that marriage was in support of the vulnerable's rights, mainly the vulnerable. Who is the most vulnerable within the marriage? It's the woman. She's the most vulnerable in the marriage, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ, before he had died, the last words that he had said, as-salat, as-salat, wa ma malakat aymanukum. As-salat, as-salat. Be keen on your salah. Do not miss on your salah. وَمَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. Basically, the women, whether the slave women or the women that are under your power. Certainly, when you're a man, you're stronger. Once you start becoming this boy in his early teenage, now you're starting to go taller than your mother. Now you're starting to go definitely physically stronger, etc. But you have to remember that the Prophet ﷺ told you to have the taqwa and not abuse your power, to disrespect your mother or disrespect your father, or use your power to perhaps disrespect your sister, or even use your power down the road to disrespect or even abuse your abuse your wife. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ had said, خَيْرُكُمْ خَيْرُكُمْ لِنِسَائِهِ. He said literally, the best of you is the best one to his women. Whether to his women was referring to the wife, or whether in the general comprehensive statement, the best of you is the best to the women, because they would be the vulnerable side, they would be the weaker side. They could come up with these strange ideas that, of course, you as a man basically designed with pragmatic thinking. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically made you the wali, and then you would be surprised whether hormones coming in and kicking into women, or perhaps maybe sometimes just getting too emotional at the wrong time and thinking through emotions kicking in. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Prophet ﷺ had told the man that these women, khayrukum khayrukum linisa, if you are the person that is seeking to be the best of akhlaq, well, the best of akhlaq is not necessarily when you deal with men, but the best of the akhlaq is when you deal with the less vulnerable side, with the weaker side, which is women. Whether that was your sister, or whether that was your mother, or whether that was your wife in the future, to basically learn how to embrace their up and downs moments, their weak moments, those moments that they could be just feeling helpless, feeling that they are basically weak or whatever it is. The true person of akhlaq, the Prophet ﷺ was letting us know that what makes manhood and masculinity is the way that man treats the women. That's what makes a gentleman. That's what makes a gentleman. A gentleman is a man that understands how to relate to women in preserving women, in understanding their vulnerable moments, understanding what they need, understanding how to give them the support, whether in security or whether they're needing perhaps maybe they're needing maybe financial support, they're needing physical support, they're needing idea support, they need ideas. So that's what a man is. A man is basically there in helping decision making, in helping physically, in helping security, in helping social dynamics, and all the that's a wali and what a wali is. So when a woman gets married, and I'm relating it to al-mithaq al-ghalidh, Islam basically wanted more to relate it to letting these guys recognize that this is a strong bond. Lady, you have a responsibility to obey your husband, and he has a responsibility to basically be the man that you had hoped that he would be. So it's a strong conduct because you had given up yourself to him, and he had given up basically a lot of things that he wanted to probably do other than being this person that is there to support you. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically told men, I want you to look at this one. Remember that ayah? You know what? Let me pick up that ayah. I'm going to get that ayah. I want you to see it because, that ayah, so many times, how do I get out of the screen? Hold on. I'm going to get this ayah out, and I want you just to see this ayah because it relates so closely. Let's see this one. الرجال قوامون على النساء. I guess we got to bring that one, right? And I want you to see something in this ayah, okay? And what we usually see, here we go. I want you to see this one. Okay, I know we all know it, but many times we would think that this ayah is against women. Let's look at this ayah and see it. So this is what the ayah says. The ayah says, الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن واهجروهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا. I want you to look closely at this ayah. This ayah goes farther than laying out rulings. Because if you were to look at the beginning of it, الرجال قوامون على النساء, this would be considered as giving me an informative clause. Men are قوامون. The word قوامون comes from the root قامة, which actually means to stand, which actually means to bring into solid, solidify, if we could use that word, if that's even proper English, to bring into making something solid, empowering, enhancing. And it also means to preserve. And it can also mean to being superior. But listen to this. When we say superior, we're not necessarily saying that women are inferior in, let's say, status, in their human status. Absolutely not. Because we had another ayah that made it clear and said that women, that every how does the ayah go? وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ صَالِحًا مِنْ ذَكَرٍ أَوْ أُنْثَى فَلْنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. Whoever does good from ذَكَر or أُنْثَى, from male or female, that they would be granted basically فَلْنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. They would be guaranteed that they would be getting حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً, a good life, i.e. Jannah. Okay, now this ayah cannot be understood without relating it to the other ayah. So when we say superior, we're not talking about humanhood. And we're not talking about that they are more righteous, but this is actually talking about in authority. Okay, this is talking about in authority, that men are supposed to be the ones in leadership, in authority, and we're going to see down the road why this would also be included in this term. Okay, we're going to see that. But like I said, it does not mean that women are inferior or that men are superior in their religion, not at all, because certainly just because Pharaoh is a male, it doesn't make him better than Asya, because even though she's a female, because the main standard that we would judge on is basically, is this person pious? Is this person a mu'min? Is this person near Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's the standard. Okay, then after that standard, then we would say, okay, is this person carrying the qualifications that enables them to carry a certain mission, enables them to carry a certain responsibility? That's when this ayah would continue to say, بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. Now, it didn't say بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعضهن. Okay, what's the difference? بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض. In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that there are certain features built in, whether we're speaking about internal features or whether we're talking about external features, whether we're talking about their anatomy of the body, or whether we're speaking about the mental structure, whether we're talking about physical structure, bone mass, bone mass, or even muscle mass, all of these different things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just letting us know that there are a certain structure, that it is rooted even in the DNA, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically created in men and created in women, that makes men, listen to this, that makes men more qualified for the position of qawam. Okay, for the position of qawam. What else? And وَبِمَا أَنفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. وَبِمَا أَنفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ, and for what they spend of their money. In other words, what they spend from their money, the financial responsibility. So does that mean that it's only the money that determines who the boss is here? Well, the answer is no. Because the ayah was telling you that there's something else that was built inside men, that was built inside women, that made men being, let's say, more qualified to be in the position of qawama, and women to be in the position of being the one to be under il-qawama / being obedient to il-qawama. Basically, one is the one that is, and you know what? There's also a different way to read this. Let me explain what I mean by that. If you say that a man is il-qawam, what would that make the woman? What would that make the woman? What's the opposite of il-qawam? All right, what's the opposite of il-qawam? So il-qawam is all the things that we had said. Then therefore, to read the nature of men as being qawamin, there's also another way. How do I read the nature of women? The nature of a woman is basically in search of il-qawam. She's in search of a person that is strong, a person that is capable of giving security, a man that is capable of giving structure, a man that is capable of giving decision-making, a man that is capable of making money, وَبِمَا أَنفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ, a man that is capable of giving preservation, capable of also giving mental security as well, emotional security as well. All of that is what qawam means. Therefore, a woman is going to be lacking that, and therefore she's in search of that. She's in search of emotional security. She's in search of financial stability. She's in search of the person that would give her preservation. She's in search of somebody that would also give her an identity. Let me stop at this because I don't want to be misunderstood. What do I mean by giving her identity? Does that mean she's basing her identity based on her husband? No. And yes, let me explain. In the West, a woman changes her name to her husband's last name when she gets married. In Islam, no. Your identity is not based on your husband's identity. Your name does not become attributed to your husband's name once you get married, because you have your independent identity. But your name, without realizing, will be connected in certain ways that it will be connected, okay, to the person that is leading you. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Imra'atul Aziz. Imra'atul Aziz. And he said, وَامْرَأَتُهُ حَمَّالَةَ الْحَطَبِ. What did he say? He said, Imra'atul Aziz. Al-Aziz's wife. And he also said, وَامْرَأَتُهُ حَمَّالَةَ الْحَطَبِ. And his woman. What is the his woman and Imra'atul Aziz supposed to indicate? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that it many times, without you realizing, there's also a built-in social construct. There's a certain thing that not only social, but something that also has a psychology that you would feel that you are somehow under the banner of your husband without you realizing. Without you realizing, it becomes part of a female nature. And that's one thing. Sorry, ladies. But in the women's world, many times I would always have to say this, not because I'm a woman like you, okay? But I'll tell you one thing. So many cases came to my office, and it was really because women, it is part of their nature that they would love to talk. It's their way. Hey, the brain, the anatomy in their brain basically pushes them to a way of basically releasing all the anxiety is by talking about it. So they would talk and talk and talk, and she would trust that friend, and that friend would get all her secrets, and then later on, she may not realize that she basically passed it on to another friend, because she too would also get this information, release it somewhere else. And I would say barely can you trust a woman with your secrets. Sorry, ladies. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But this is the truth. Barely you can trust a woman with your secrets, because they may not know when and how to recognize that when I told you a secret, that didn't mean that you had the right to basically disclose it based on your terms of when was it okay to do so. Barely do you find women that know how to be, let's say, aminin, or have that trust, or have that security, or have that integrity to recognize how to preserve a secret. So sorry, ladies. Now, having that being said, Why am I saying that? Because women consult to their husbands. Women feel whether it's her father that she needs to turn to seek support, or whether it's her male figure that is a new male figure, which is her husband, or down the road, whether it's her son. A male figure to women is basically carrying more than just a person with, I don't know, a six-pack or a physical feature, etc. A male figure in a woman's mind carries il-qawama, carries power, carries security, carries support, carries emotional support, carries financial support, carries all of that. If the man is not capable of really showing that, she's going to look for another man. And this is extremely important. So if you are the male figure in a household, whether you're the father, if you are not providing that woman, if let's say she's your daughter, you're not providing her this male figure that is in what her brain is looking for, she's going to look for someone else. She's going to look for someone else. So whether it's looking for someone else as a husband, or somebody that she might think this man on the street is basically going to give her that, she will go there and get manipulated. And she can easily get manipulated. And men know how to manipulate women because they know that they're emotional creatures. She's looking for someone to basically endorse her physical appearance, or even endorse and make her feelings, or whatever she feels, that it's valid. And they'll basically recognize, or at least say that her feelings are valid, regardless what it is. They will not disregard her feelings. And then she will fall for it, that this person, hey, he's validating my feelings, my emotions, and he's basically endorsing and giving me empowerment about my appearance. This person is the right person for me. And that's one thing, is that a woman is looking for that. So if you would validate her feelings, I'm not saying in everything, you would definitely need to be wise, but therefore, just looking at this ayah and seeing the psychology of women and the psychology of men in this ayah. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ. So as-salihat are basically the pious women. Qanitat, they are qanitat. What is il-qanit? Il-qanit is basically a person that is being spiritual, that is being obedient. But is this obedience to Allah, or is this obedience to the husband? That's the differences of opinions between scholars of tafsir. I don't want to get into that. حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ, they preserve al-ghayb. Why preserve al-ghayb? Preserving al-ghayb, all the different things that basically are secrets. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that a woman would recognize that this home is her secret, this home, and what the husband is basically preserving with her, whether it's information, or whether her chastity, or whether the children, or whether the home itself. She recognizes that she was given a mithaq ghalidh to basically be responsible over this home, and therefore all that no one else knows about, she doesn't go display it, she doesn't go disclose it, she doesn't go and expose it. All of that, the man will have shortcomings at home, and she recognizes all those shortcomings. She doesn't go display it or expose it, not to her family and not to her friends or etc., because she has the tendency to go and disclose it as a way of perhaps as a way of ventilation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, for a salihah woman, she's hafidha lil-ghayb. She doesn't go ventilating, exposing whether the husband or her own home, but she would preserve the home. Bima hafidhallah, for what the Lord Almighty had also preserved. In other words, it's a bond, a mithaq ghalidh, that only her and Allah know all the details about this. whether he was probably maybe a person that was selfish, or maybe a person that is not too concerned about his hygiene, or maybe not too concerned about his piety so much. All of these different things, that's supposed to be hafizatul lil-ghaib. Preserve it for the husband. Preserve it by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had preserved. Let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala know about this. Don't disclose it. Don't display it. Let that be something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be the one to whether reward, give hidayah, or even punish that person for whatever ill conduct or wrong behavior that they might actually have. وَاللَّاتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ. Now this is redirecting the way that the ayah was starting out with. The ayah was basically here from this ayah, from this part right here up until here, is all considered as an informative clause. Now this is directional. وَاللَّاتِي تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ. And those that you would fear, nushuzahun. What is a nushuz? In nushuz is when something goes basically up. Think of a plateau. Think of plains, very easy. There's no hills, no mountains, etc. That's a plain. Okay. In nushuz is basically when you have something sticking out in the middle of a plain thing, something that is easy. Everything is basically going into, let's say, a stable, or basically containing all this, everything is smooth, and then something just pops up right in the middle. Okay, that's a nushuz. In nushuz is when something goes against trying to somehow overcome something, or something that is trying to go superior, beyond, etc. Nushuzahunna, that's a nushuz. Then in that situation, you would want to give them in and basically correct that behavior. Okay, why then correct that behavior? Because at that point, we have a home that was supposed to be, if based on salihah, she's pious, she's qanita, she's hafidh al-ghaib, everything's supposed to be fine. But there would be certain situations where she would feel that, you know what, who knows whether it's an outsider that came in, or who knows what happened, okay, that basically resulted in nushuz, in seeking to go outside. And I don't mean outside of the home, but basically outside of that stability within the home. Then this says, what you need to give them is kind words. Start with kind words. Start to remind them about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the second thing, if this is not working, then uhjuruhunna fil madaja'. He didn't say ihjuruhunna fil buyut. He said ihjuruhunna fil madaja'. What does that mean? Ihjuruhunna fil madaja' actually means you would abandon the bed. Is that abandon the bed to basically mean go sleep on the couch? No. It means you're going to sleep on the bed right next to her, but you're probably going to give her your back. Okay? So what is that supposed to mean? I mean, who's admonishing who here? Who is basically, it's both. You, the husband, is now getting weaker when it's a woman next to him, basically right there, his own halal wife next to him, and the woman is also feeling weaker. The desire is growing stronger. Her husband is next to her. Yes, he's not pretty happy, but they're both next to each other. Now you gotta, with that closeness, let me see how you can figure it out. Let me see how you can figure it out. That's why in another hadith, although there's a debate about it, that the Prophet ﷺ said, وَلَا يَهْجُرْنَ إِلَّا فِي الْبَيْتِ, or إِلَّا فِي الْبُيُوتِ, that they should, sorry, أَلَّا يَهْجُرَ إِلَّا فِي الْبَيْتِ, sorry, here we go. أَلَّا يَهْجُرَ إِلَّا فِي الْبَيْتِ, that they should not do il-hajr except within the home. And the hadith was basically narrated, I believe Mu'awiyah ibn Abi Sufyan was the narrator, that al-hajr would only be within the home. Even though there's a debate about this, the authenticity and the credibility of this hadith, but it's something to learn from, and it does have a basis. Let's say it that way. Why? Because وَهْجُرُهُنَّ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ is not admonishing the woman alone, it's also admonishing him as well. Okay? وَاضْرِبُوهُنْ. What is وَاضْرِبُوهُنْ? This actually means to hit, to strike. But stop right there, because of course the Orientalists would come in and say, look, Islam is basically against women's rights and etc. But I would like to quote number one, Ata ibn Abi Rabah. Ata ibn Abi Rabah explained this ayah. First of all, who's Ata ibn Abi Rabah? Ata ibn Abi Rabah was a great scholar in Mecca. Although he was blind in one eye and bald, short, he was an African descent. He was lame. He was a scholar. He was at one point he was a slave that was freed. He was a person that was honored. Why was he honored? He was honored because of the ilm that he had. And in fact, they described him as even having a big stomach. So you're talking about a short man with a big stomach and a lame man. So, and one of his eyes was basically, there was something wrong with it right there. So in other words, blind with one eye, and all of these features, you would think, oh, that doesn't look like a handsome man. Definitely not on the handsome side. But he was one of the scholars that even the Khalifa would line up in a queue in order to get answers for some of the questions. He was a tabi'i. He learned from the Sahaba, and he had died 110 or 107 Hijriya, with differences of opinions on when exactly and what year exactly was his death. Regardless, he explained that وَاضْرِبُوهُنْ, that the Prophet, when he said وَلَا يَضْرِبُ خِيَارَكُمْ, that the best of you would not beat their women. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said وَلَا يَضْرِبُ خِيَارَكُمْ, the best of you would not beat their women. And therefore, that he said, when this ayah was revealed, many women came to the Prophet ﷺ complaining, going to the house of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't there when this ayah was revealed. A lot of the male Sahaba heard this ayah being revealed, that, oh, وَاضْرِبُوهُنْ, oh girl, I was waiting for that moment. You were really just getting on my nerves. Now is that ayah giving me the validation to basically beat you up. And here it is. And started beating. That's when the wives of those guys, they came over to Sayyidah Aisha, where's the Prophet ﷺ? We've got something to complain about here. What just happened? So then the Prophet ﷺ basically had one, explained that الضرب should not be mubarrih. What is mubarrih? Mubarrih meaning it does not leave a mark, does not leave a bruise, does not puncture the body, does not bleed, does not leave any type of a mark that there was a strike in any way. And the Prophet ﷺ had given a demonstration that it's like holding a piece of siwak, and it was more a symbolic way of striking to say, you know what, this is gotta stop, or whatever it is. And the second thing, Ata ibn Abi Rabah had said, when the Prophet ﷺ said, وَلَا يَضْرِبُ خِيَارَكُمْ, the best of you do not use this method as a way to admonish, or even as a method at all. He said that was giving it like an abrogation. He didn't say that it was abrogated, so that nobody would misquote me. He didn't say that it was abrogated, but he would say that this is giving us an inspiration that although the ayah says this, but then the Salihin would not use that as a method. Okay, فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ. Now this, someone might say, well, okay, well, right now the women are right now really left with nothing right there to support. So here's what the ayah continues. فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ, if they obey you, what is that supposed to mean? That itta'a is not just a hadith. Somebody might come up to me 2 days ago. Someone came up to me and they said, well, Mustafa al-Adwi said that there's no hadith that says that a woman is supposed to obey her husband, or at least no hadith, no authentic hadith, and those hadith are not authentic, even though that's, you know, that claim is not necessarily true all the way, but well, we're going to discuss that later on. فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ is enough to say that when it says right there, قَوَّامُونَ, part of al-qawama is basically explained right there. فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ, if they obey you. What is that supposed to mean? That part of al-qawama is that she would be obedient. If he is qawam, then she is obedient. What is obedient? The Prophet ﷺ explained it. إِنَّمَا الطَّاعَةُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. What is bil-ma'ruf? Bil-ma'ruf means two things. Bil-ma'ruf, what is good in general? Ma'ruf, you know, this is good. The second meaning, bil-ma'ruf, within that society. If within that society it was known that, let's say, I don't know, give me something within, at least back in the days, it was part of our culture that that the woman would, whenever the husband comes in, she would take off his jacket and she would basically have some kind of like I don't know, some kind of I don't know, like a thing to massage the feet and all of that. That was back in the days, okay? Back in the days, long time ago, okay? And that was something that was considered that's a sign of obedient wife, okay? Right now, if you were to say such a thing, you would be thinking like, oh my God, what woman? This is so disrespectful to the woman. Why would you do that? Etc. But hey, back in the days, that was considered as ma'ruf. That was considered as a good way of treating the husband, etc. So فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ, and right there is basically saying, one, الطاعة في المعروف, or طاعة بالمعروف, on good terms, and number two, الطاعة based on the culture. Culture has a lot to say whether this is within the parameters of what he has the right to order in, or whether she doesn't have to obey within that. So culture is important. Keep that one in mind, because many would think that we don't have to look at culture. And that's why I would say it's important to recognize, before you get married to that person, look into the culture to know what is expected of you. Okay, this is extremely important. What is expected of you is basically based on whose culture? My culture or his culture? Differences of opinions between scholars, but certainly I would say it's not his culture or your culture, my preponderant, okay? It's basically on how we compromise to embrace each other's cultures. Okay, فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا. Now this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking here. فَلَا تَبْغُوا, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directing his words at the men. If they obey you, فَلَا تَبْغُوا, don't seek, don't get your narcissist mindset right now. So she's obeying you, but don't take advantage of her obedience and seek further more and more and more and drain her. Don't become a narcissist and abuse that she's trying to be an obedient wife and she's trying to be a good wife, and you are abusing the fact that she's trying to make it to Jannah, but then you go and draining her from her identity, draining her from her humanhood, draining her from her energy, draining her emotionally, draining her, and thinking that, yeah, well, I still am al-Qawam and therefore I get to enslave you. Think again. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, think again, and you better watch your ground. How? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah kana aliyan kabira. Your Lord Almighty is Ali. He didn't say Sami'an Basira. He said aliyan kabira. Why? Because if you thought you were Qawam and you recognize that, and if you thought that you could use that position and that somehow you can get carried away with your authority to abuse her obedience and think that you have a divine commandment that is giving credibility to your orders, think again. He said, Inna Allah kana aliyan kabira. Know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Ali. Know that He is most high. So if I told you that you were al-Qawwam, don't necessarily think that you are superior because your Lord Almighty is the one that is superior. He is al-Ali. He said He is aliyan kabira. Added it with kabira. There is no way that you can actually think of a stronger statement of tahdeed, of warning, of cautioning, of threatening, more than that. Inna Allah kana aliyan kabira. Meaning what? If you were to take in any way advantage of that woman and her vulnerability, or that woman and her desire or her need, or that woman and her piety, and drain her emotionally, physically, sexually, and the list goes on, and how you can drain her, and think that you can in any way use this by thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me the tool to basically talk to you, but then I'm going to go farther, and He even gave me the green pass to also hit you with it, and think that you can get away with it. Oh, you better watch yourself right there, for your Lord Almighty is aliyan kabira. You better watch yourself. That's why when you look at al-mithaq al-ghalidh, you cannot understand al-mithaq al-ghalidh without understanding basically this ayah and putting it within that reference, within that ayah, and understanding it fully. So now that we talked about al-mithaq al-ghalidh, of course, Islam, because of this mithaq al-ghalidh, it's not like any other contract. That's why there's a wedding. That's why there's family participation, family agreement, gifts, or the mahar, basically a shared life, a hard, long process to leave this contract. You can't just, okay, that's it. I'm basically getting sick of this man. Here we go. I'm flying away to probably another country, or I'm just leaving. No, it doesn't go like that. This is a serious thing. You enter it in a whole party for it, and you enter it. There's a whole list of things to do. There's a whole process. There's a whole policy to it. Then you can't just leave like that. You can't just leave like that. This is childish. Islam tells you this is a mithaq ghalidh, that there's a certain way and a certain process to enter it, and another certain process and timing in case you needed to leave it. So therefore, there are certain words to say to enter and certain words to say to leave. This is a serious issue and not child play. Well, when you say family, I see that you had said family a number of different times. Why is family even an issue? Why is family getting involved? I mean, it's just me and my husband. Why is my family at all getting involved in this whole thing? Number one is that it's to cherish the experience that you lack about marriage, about you don't know what is required in a marriage, what money is needed, what advice. Women have a completely, you're a man, you had been playing with your boyfriends all that time. Boyfriends are completely different in their psychology, in their needs, in their expectations than a woman friend, meaning a wife here. So the father would basically, and this is one thing, is that whether it's a male or a female, they would watch and mimic their parents. So the child is replicating, let's say if it's a girl, she's replicating her mother. So you want to see, how is the mother treating her husband? And let someone, let's say, get some information or know, because guess what? The girl's going to be replicating her mother. And the boy is going to be replicating his father on how he's going to be a husband. We would basically take that as that dynamic that we would mirror in our psychology, in our behavior, in what we would consider is supposed to be the parameter that I would be basically living my life in. So when we say family interference or family, let's say, involvement, that's basically one side, is that you would recognize, one, that the family's experience, your father's experience, your mother's experience are basically there to help you see beyond your scope. Beyond your scope. You as perhaps a teenager, or you as probably in your early 20s, you come and see life from the scope of perhaps maybe theoretical, or perhaps see the scope from, yeah, she looks cute, she looks attractive, that's my type of eyes, that's my type of whatever. You go on, and the girl's like, yeah, he really has a nice sense of humor, he really has, a charming smile, whatever it is. You look at these things, those are superficial, dear. Those are superficial. What really makes an important difference within a marriage is not the superficial traits. They're basically the main traits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you to look into. We're going to get there, okay? But the family, let's just emphasize on that one, because down the road we'll be talking about the qualifications. The family with their experience, and I think it's very important to cherish the experience and not just the degrees. You might have a PhD in whatever you might have a PhD in, but life is completely different in its dynamic than the book that you had studied or the dissertation that you had written. Congratulations on that, but life is a completely different dynamic. It's a completely different dynamic. So therefore, involving your parents is to give you, one, advice, to give you, let's say, a range of vision. 3, to give you support. Why support? Because at one point in life, you may become absent. Whether absent in maybe some kind of a problem happening to you, maybe an illness, maybe death, whatever it is, then the family is basically expected then to take over when you were not capable of taking over. So it's fair to involve the family, because there's something called in fiqh, we say al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. Let me put that down, okay? This is really important. Ladies, please pay attention to this one. Al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. What does that mean? This is not al-ghanam, but this is al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. What does that mean? Al-ghunm, I'm going to say it, even though a little different, but al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. Al-ghunm is whenever you would get a reward for something. Bil-ghurm would be basically, in retrospect, there would be another thing that comes from another side. Just as you're expected, if let's say your father dies, you're expected to inherit the money. Well, that's al-ghunm. That's a reward. That's money that you would get. If your father owed debt and owed money to other persons, to other people, then within that whole definition of, you would be capable of getting ghanima, you would be capable of getting a booty, you would be capable of getting the money. You don't just get the money, but you also get the responsibility in doing the payment in the other direction as well. You don't just say, well, I have the right to receive. Oh, you also, in the case of the absence of that person, you also would have the responsibility to pay back. Al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. Or are you only there to just say, well, yeah, I want that inheritance, but when it comes to paying back, you're like, I can't afford it. Or you say, well, why do I have to pay back? He's the one that asked for that loan. It wasn't me. No, just like you would want to get the money of inheritance. Well, it goes both ways. And that's the same thing. That if you're expecting the husband or the family to be there for you, then it would make sense that you would also take their words and their advice at the same time that you would expect them to be there for you. You expect them to be there for you? Well, then let them get involved as well. Because it cannot go one direction that, yeah, when it comes to responsibility, they're there, but when it comes to, let's say, I don't want to say reward, but I would say when it comes to their involvement, oh, you have nothing to do with me. This is my life. Seriously. But they will ask for their help when your life goes in the wrong direction. It goes both ways. So Islam tells you, al-ghunmu bil-ghurm, same thing. You want your father to be there in support for you when, let's say, a man starts somehow flirting with you on the street. You want him to be there to protect you. You want your brother to be there to protect you and say, hey, don't talk to these guys, or don't walk the street. You want him there to protect you, right? Well, then you would basically also have to listen to his direction when he says, don't walk that straight. Because if anything happens, I'm the one that is responsible as a man to be there to protect you, as your brother, to be there to defend you, to be there to protect you, to be there to give you security. So when it comes to me putting my life at risk, you expect me to be there. But when it comes to me giving you directions to make sure that I am secure and you are secure, that way you won't put my life at risk, and I'll tell you, don't walk that street, you're gonna call it patriarchal? So Islam tells you, wait a minute. No. You have to understand al-ghunmu bil-ghurm. Just as you expect him to pay a price, you would also need to be in some ways compliant. And just like you would want the family to be there in your support, then it would make sense to at least consult them in this matter to see also that they would be involved, because if anything goes wrong, they too will be responsible. They too will have some kind of a responsibility, whether on their reputation or whether financially or whether psychologically. They're mentally affected by all of this. So that's why when we look at family support, it goes beyond just wedding and being present for, let's call it just for the picture. But no, unfortunately, during our times of social media, the presence of the father's presence or the family's presence and perhaps the family's presence is more superficial. It's made just for the picture. But Islam tells you, no, this, don't go superficial. I want you to recognize the core of it. I want you to recognize the implication of it. So helping, giving the advice is key. Let's look into this. Oh God. So when we look at giving advice, the Prophet ﷺ, when Abu Dhar asked for the position, he said, Ya Aba Dhar, innaka da'if, wa innaha amana. When Abu Dhar wanted the position to be in the governance, the Prophet ﷺ tells Abu Dhar, you are weak. What does it mean to be weak? It basically means not physically weak. He wasn't physically weak, but weak to mean you lack the credibility. You lack the qualification. And وَإِنَّهَا أَمَانَةٌ. And therefore, ladies, especially mothers, many times, many times, though many women, many mothers especially, they think that by stripping the fathers from their authority or from their responsibility, that somehow it's because they're doing the wrong decision making. When you say right decision making, I agree that this involves a lot of, I guess, perspective, vision. It's relative, but I would say if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given the father the responsibility of being al-wali, who am I to come and say, he's not qualified, therefore I'm going to strip it out of him? Although, yes, in some cases, some men do lack the qualification to be wali. There's no doubt about that. I'm not talking about those rare and extreme cases. And therefore, I would like to say, ladies, please, mothers in particular, even if you may not like the father's attitude, do not take away the credibility of the father and bring some kind of an appearance that undermines the father's importance in the girl's life, because that, without you recognizing the other man, sorry ladies, men consider men more than they consider women. Men give more credibility to men than give credibility to women. This is khalas. There's a fact on ground. There are realities. You might say, oh, it's the influence of culture and all of that. There are certain things it's just built in. They see mom from the very early times of their life. They see mom as a person that is emotional, that I can change my mom's decision making by perhaps maybe asking for it nicely, maybe changing the narrative. Mom will change her ideas, will change her decision making, but dad comes in as firm. What is the inference that the child from early childhood, what do they get out of that? They would get out of that, father is a place of firmness, father is a place of authority, father is a place of power. And from their early childhood, they would recognize what you may thought that, yeah, I want to tell him this. You can say it in words, but children will read farther than what your words say. And a boy or a girl, they will recognize dad is a place of power. Dad is a place of authority. Authority means security if done in the right way. Because if it's done in the wrong way, then it becomes a place of insecurity, dhulm, and fear. Then that's if it was done in the wrong way. Put in the so if put in the wrong way, it becomes a place of insecurity. So, but in the end, remember, al-hukmu lil-a'am al-aghlab. This is a general ruling in Islam. Al-hukm lil-a'am al-aghlab. What does that mean? When we want to make a ruling, we make a ruling based on the majority. Al-hukm lil-a'am al-aghlab. For the majority, not those rare instances. I do recognize there are these instances where this father might be a narcissist person, might be a zalim, might be lacking wisdom, might be just self-centered, all of these different things. I do recognize that that exists. Okay? I do recognize that that exists. But even when that exists, in the case of a father, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وإن جاهداك على أن تشرك بما ليس لك به علم فلا تطعهما وصاحبهما في الدنيا معروفا. Accompany them even if they were to disregard, let's say, the borders, even if they were to order you to do shirk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, صاحبهما في الدنيا معروفا. You have to accompany your parents on good terms, in good ways. Why? Because that is the term, that is the principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. صاحبوا ما في الدنيا معروفة, or even when they, let's say, transgress the limit, part of صاحبوا ما في الدنيا معروفة, even if they are not Muslim, even if they are not Muslim, is to let them get involved as much as you can and within, let's say, the right parameter, within your family problems, within your marriage, within making the right decisions, whether it's a male or a female. Unless they're, completely, let's say, anti-Islam, extreme anti-Islam, those are different cases. Okay, now, the Prophet ﷺ also said for making the dua as barakallahu lak. What is al-barakah? Al-barakah is bringing anything that is good within this marriage or within anything. Meaning what? You can drink water, like we said last time, and it can be just a hydrant, or you can drink water and this water might actually be something that will give you treatment. And that's the same thing. You can get married and probably fulfills one side of your life, but then if there's so much distress in it and there's so much anxiety within it, then it lacks barakah. Then we'll say, okay, where did this lack of barakah come in from? Okay, and certainly the Prophet ﷺ taught us to make the dua, barakallahu lak wa baraka alayk wa jama'a baynakuma fi khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring you barakah and bring barakah for you and bring barakah to you and bring barakah amongst you. So we'll end right here, but we've got 10 more minutes left. So if there are any questions, so I'd be happy to answer them. I know we went in a lot of details. Let me just say before that, some girls mimic their father. Absolutely. If they see that he's a good, I'm a girl that used to mimic my father. And then later when I got married, I mimicked my mother. It's a completely different dynamic, but I would always mimic my father in so many ways. I'm a girl that was very close to my father, just on myself, very, very close to my father. Not that I wasn't close to my mother, but I was probably, my father, Allah yajzil khair, he would sit for hours and hours just talking to me and just explaining life to me and explaining so many different things. And he would spend, and this is something, Jazakallah khairan, he would spend wallahi hours in just talking to me about marriage, about life, about money, about business, about politics, you name it. He would basically talk to me about it and just for hours. And I mean, I recognized that for my father. I even worked with my father in business for some time. And I learned a lot about the men's world by working closely with my father, and he would explain certain things. And I saw that the men's world is completely different from the women's world. And thank God I'm not a man, because their world is completely different. Yes, completely different. And definitely I would be thinking like, not my world. And that's why I was like, no, thanks. I don't want to get into business. But all right. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer it, inshallah. Let me see. Let's see. Do we have anything in, would American court recognize Islamic child support? That's a tricky question. I would probably say, every certain court system in every single state basically has its own system. But many times, if you were to say Sharia law, okay, that's when they become, I would say, they would become, it depends on the person, on the judge that is there. The second that you would say Sharia law, there are a lot of stereotypical images on what that is. But I had participated in other courts, and I said the word Sharia law and explained the word Sharia law, and I had certain judges that were that were very open and very open-minded, and the way that they showed appreciation about Sharia law and how the system was basically demonized by the Orientalists or by different groups, not because of what it carries, but because of political interests to demonize a certain group of people. So I've had judges that were really inclusive and really open and open-minded. And I had other judges, just by the word Sharia law, their white supremacy just could not wrap the word Sharia law around their head, no matter how you tried to explain it and how you tried to break it down. They were just there ready to just be closed and not even negotiate it in any way. So it depends which group, and sometimes it depends on the judge that you're dealing with. So in America, the court system sometimes and may consider what is the word that we could use? Basically the cases that had preceded this case, and what other judges basically ruled in cases that are similar to this. So in other words, they would compare it to other cases and use it and base it on that. Other judges may actually consider that, no, let me look into this, and perhaps lawyers might look into it as, well, this is an agreement, but not necessarily Sharia law in itself. But if this is an agreement, that this is what they agreed on, and therefore they had the witnesses, and therefore he has to be compliant based on that. So certainly. But in terms of child support in the American system is not very different from child support in the Islamic system. In fact, I would claim that child support in the American system, I would claim that it actually replicates and takes child support system, it traces back all the way to the Maliki in the Hanafi madhab. If you were to look at most of the secular laws, unless we're talking about these random issues, most of the system in let's say the governance system in secular, in America, in France, in Britain, it actually is very similar. In fact, it traces back, and we've got evidence to actually support that. In fact, if you even studies are actually saying that Thomas Jefferson used the Quran as one of his references, and it's still there in the library with his notes on the Quran translated. The translated Quran and basically using that, and even on one of, forgot which building that was, but on one of the buildings that basically is a government building, it basically has the different references that the government or the references that basically act as what the references for the Constitution is, and one of them shows that they're holding a copy of the Quran. So this is not to say everything about their governance system is based on Quran, but this does say that a lot of the secular government and what it basically rules by, a lot of it is based on Islamic foundation. In other words, it doesn't contradict at the least of it, unless we're talking about things that may have had feminist influence, or perhaps maybe criminal law and all of that. Some things may be different, but most of the things, they're actually very similar and carry the same idea. Humaira, go ahead, dear.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sheikha. Inshallah, I can ask my question correctly. You mentioned before that in the ayah, when we were doing the tafsir, that a woman must not share her privacy to her family members. But here we mentioned in this slide that she can ask for support, and she must share, if I'm not mistaken.
Fair enough. So there is a difference between taking that family consultation before the marriage takes place in a consultation after the marriage takes place, in a consultation even if after a marriage takes place. There is a whole process. You don't, if we're talking about before marriage, then definitely nothing had happened. So there's no privacy that we're talking about. In fact, right now we're exposing that information to make sure we're making the right information, we're making the right decision, sorry. So if, let's say, the father or the girl managed to get information that that this man that is coming over has tantrum issues, okay? If we're speaking, the marriage doesn't happen yet. This isn't ghaiba. She managed to make friends with his sister, and his sister disclosed the information and said, you know, at home, he has tantrum issues. He may sometimes get really angry and start throwing the things around him and so forth, and, you know, meltdowns and all of that. And in that situation, she basically shared that information to the father and said, Dad, this is what this sister or his sister basically leaked information about her brother, and this is what we know. Okay, then the information, like, okay, let's, you know, add that to the data and basically talk about this. But let's say within the marriage, let's say she happened to know that he has a very bad habit, throwing his dirty laundry everywhere, dirty socks. He comes in so tired, just throws his dirty laundry, or probably maybe, let's just say, hygiene issues, or probably tantrum issues at home. Okay, now they're married. Don't disclose that, not until you basically fail to use different methods to correct that, because right now it's probably affecting your relationship. Okay, let's say he's got really bad feet smell, okay, and you said, listen, this is affecting me. I can't handle the smell. You may not realize it, but I'm realizing it. It's affecting me. And you tried to convince him to go to get treatment. You tried to take him to basically the different doctors, and he just is so basically not caring to go and get treatment, not caring to, even when he went, he wasn't consistent with his medications, didn't really take the matter seriously, and now it's affecting you mentally. Now it's affecting your relationship. Now he's asking you for intimacy, and you're like, you know what? Oh my God, I can't even handle the matter. I can't handle the smell. Now it's affecting you. So you deprive the different methods. He went and he's not consistent with it, and you use different methods to basically, hey, you know what, here, smell your socks. Do you smell anything here? And he still doesn't get it. Then you can probably then bring in and explain perhaps to your father or to your mother or to the person that has, let's say, a nice advice without exposing him, that, you know, there is a matter that I don't have to tell you directly because I don't want to dishonor you, but I would like to say that, you know, sometimes this can affect women, especially smell. And especially smell, it can affect the relationship, and here's what you can do about it. And it's taking this matter then from within the perimeter of our household, in the case when she could not find a solution to it, to probably raising it to a higher level of intervention, which is family. But I would recommend not raising this to the family until you deprive all the different means of trying to solve it on your own. Okay, because if you bring in family within your, let's call it within your perimeter, guess what happens? You widen the area. And that's the last thing that I would recommend you doing. Don't involve your parents and your family until you really, really, really have to, and you had really deprived all the different means to solve this problem. So that's a huge difference between before marriage and after marriage. And there's a whole process. So this is just a tip right there. Humaira, did I answer your question, dear?
Yes, Jazakallah khairan, Sheikha.
وإياكم. Any other questions? I don't know if there are any hands risen, but so we can conclude, inshallah. Suad, go ahead, dear.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So my question is quite similar to Sister Humaira, in terms of like the men having specific guidelines in Surah An-Nisa in terms of like addressing a situation with their spouse, with the wife. Is there something like that specific for the women, or do you just?
There is, dear. There is. We're going to get to it. There
Okay.
is definitely there. It's also called nushuz. Just a just a hint right there.
Okay.
Even for the men's nushuz, what
Okay.
should we do then? Yeah, there's something that needs to be done there too. So yeah, but definitely, ladies, it doesn't mean that it's the same way. Yes, there's no fahjuruhum, فعظوهم وهجروهم في المضاجع وبعدين if they don't obey you, you know what? Just give it to them right there and start throwing your shoes. No, there's nothing of that sort. It's different. So we're gonna get there, inshallah.
Inshallah. Can I ask one more question if you don't mind?
Go ahead, dear.
So in Somalia, I think today or yesterday, there's been talk in terms of the age of marriage legally being changed to 18 now.
In Somalia?
Yes, in Somalia.
18?
18.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yes.
That's
So,
you know who was after that. You do know that, right?
no, I don't. No,
It's actually Sedaw. Sedaw, Sedaw. You gotta look into that. That's what's after that. And Somalia signed the contract and basically was part of Sedaw, which is basically the United Nations. In order to, of course, it is presented that it was for women's rights and that it was basically to support women, support family, etc. But it is radical feminist, the radical feminist influence basically putting that, and it became that UN pressure. Right now it's the UN pressure. Somalia signed it along with Sudan, along with over I don't know how many countries. Guess who didn't sign it?
In India as well.
America didn't sign it. America said, we ain't going to be signing this because we're not going to have radical feminists dictating our culture and dictating what we should be doing. Look at this. America didn't sign it. Muslim countries, including Saudi Arabia, signed it. And now they have to comply. Because if you don't comply, you're going to get sanctioned. You signed something, you got to comply. And part of that, and by the way, Sedaw is not just feminist, but it is, you read those the rules and the laws and what it really aims at. It really looks to take away power from the fathers in order to have government power over these women, and creates more spaces for zina and zina and zina and all the different types of sexual misconduct. You go check out Sedaw. There's actually a really good person. His name is Iyad Qnebi. He did an outstanding job. There are subtitles for his videos that you can actually see. Did an outstanding job in exposing Sedaw. And you can go Iyad, Eyad Qnebi, Qnaiba, I believe, something like that. He is Palestinian and also living in Jordan, but he is a pharmacist, but did a really good job in exposing a lot of these political things right there. And Sedaw is one of those things, whether Sedaw or even atheism, he did a really good job. He has more than almost right now, almost a 1.5, 1.7 million followers, even on YouTube. You can check them out on YouTube. So definitely look at those subtitles, look at that Sedaw and how it got exposed through him. Did a really good job. And of course, when they're trying to raise the age, guess what? So they wanted to raise the age to 18, okay? But then they basically also, part of those laws, okay? Part of those laws is that that there would be more spaces to give girls and boys, basically, but it was more focused on girls because it was a feminist introduction, to give them more spaces to explore, this is the word that was used, to explore their preferences, their sexual preferences, and basically prevent the fathers from getting involved in at all, whether in giving her direction, or of course we're against a father imposing a certain person to, for her to get married to. There's no doubt about that, but that's not what they're really aiming at. They're actually aiming at making the whole world basically become a replica of the Western society, where girls are easy access to men, easy access to basically those on the street, and then therefore they don't have to be restricted, that is the man, to only be within a marriage relationship. So it's opening these institutions to basically having it as yes, it's to give women their rights, but the truth of the matter, it's actually to take away their rights without us realizing. But I didn't think that in Somalia they would, although they did sign the contract, but I thought, they would not dare actually apply that one. But Allah al-Musta'an. Go ahead, dear. Go ahead, dear.
No, inshallah, I'll look into the information you provided me, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah.
Yeah, you got to look into it and educate your society about it, and yes, and this needs to be really exposed, and we really have to march against it, and we really have to educate about it. SEDAW, it's called SEDAW. Remember, again, SEDAW, and look into it, because this is right now trying to take away, they're calling it patriarchal. It's like taking away father control, but it's not father control. It's basically family in making the support to letting the government, to letting the secular governments, to letting the guys basically out on the streets abuse these girls. And what it's paving, listen to this, what it's paving for is really human trafficking. If you are to look into all that is happening, hey, that Epstein thing with Trump and all of that, they're really covering that up. And because it exposes this system, whether we're speaking about the trafficking or whether we're speaking about, remember the Clinton files and all of that, it's not just about the oil. No, you're talking about human trafficking. You're talking about the money. You're talking about a whole system that is trying to make easy access to basically these evil, cruel people out there. And certainly when you look at SEDAW, and you look at the laws that are pressuring basically the different societies to comply with, it's not, if you're opening from the other end and say, well, we want the girls to basically have easy access to condoms and easy access to having their sexual right and all of that, they're not talking about sexual right. They're actually talking about sexual aberration to become a culture. And that's why they would be talking about, the freedom for abortion and all of that. The freedom of abortion is basically wanting to have, let's say, sex without the responsibility and the implication of the responsibility that it basically comes with. They want to make it a society that, even if it means killing the fetus, even if it means killing the baby, even if it means this, we want to basically have the freedom of entertainment, the freedom of basically sexual relations without the pressure of family, without the pressure of the childbearing, without the pressure of, all that. No responsibility, just entitlement, just give us this and this, and that's all we want. And that's basically nothing but shaitani. Nothing but shaitani. So you're basically wanting them to have all this information from the age of 11 and 12 and even younger. But then you're raising the age, which basically gives them a halal bond up until 18. But you opened up all those doors to exciting their lust all these years, when we know that the strongest time for their lust is basically 17 for boys and 15 and 16 for girls. So you're looking, what are you doing here? Allah al-Musta'an. Okay, let's see. She says, but Americans calculate mother's income and father's income. So like I said, I'm not saying that everything in the American system is, is the same as Islamic system, but I say in many ways. I would probably make a percentage of perhaps maybe 70%, 75%, 75% of the secular laws are actually going in congruence and are similar to Islamic laws, not in every detail. Just like, for example, you're talking about maybe even in family law, not everything is basically going in accordance with Islam. Not everything, but I would say in many ways. Does Islam also calculate a woman's income for child support? No, it doesn't calculate the woman's income for child support, but it will consider that there is let's say that there is the basis that the father is responsible, but at the same time the father or the ex now, okay, is not going to be responsible to pay for the woman's stay. So he'll be responsible for the children's stay, but in that situation, we would say, okay, let's say she insisted that she wanted a home that basically is $5,000 rent. Let's just assume, okay? And the father was like, that is outside of my financial capabilities. And she insisted that no, I would want to be in this $5,000 rent home and all of that, and let's say she was making this kind of money. She was a businesswoman, rich woman, making this kind of money. I had a case like that, by the way. This isn't hypothetical, but I had a case like that. She was making like a lot of money. She was a really rich woman, and he was an engineer. And he was only making $4,500 a month and definitely could not afford this. And she was expecting that, hey, this is what you would have to pay, at least $3,000 in rent. And he's like, well, that leads me to what? $1,000, $1,500 just for eating and sustaining myself? That doesn't make sense. Okay. So when we look at the picture, the general picture, we're going to say, okay, well, you know what? If you want to live in a $5,000 home, good luck. But we're going to look at his income and then see how much are we going to deduct from his income to sustain a family of 3 or sustain a family of 4, but not on the wife's terms, on the terms with circumstances that relate to both sides, but not on necessarily the wife's terms, because it wouldn't be fair. If he can't afford it, what are we going to do? So then we would say, okay, well, let me say what the wife's terms are and what the husband's terms are, and then we would look into the situation. But that does not mean that it's going to be based on her terms and not based on her financial situation. We're going to go in details with that, inshallah, once we talk about child support. Let's see. In India as well, she said, long back, this ruling here for boys 21 years, girls 18. Please, can someone spell the name of the person Sheikha just spoke about? Iyad Qunebi, there you go. Humaira just wrote that down. Iyad Qunebi, good job. Right there, EYAD QUNAIBI. definitely follow that guy. Really smart. I don't agree with everything he says, but at least political analysis, but he's still a really smart guy, and really did a really good job in refuting atheism. Did a whole series. I think it was called something yaqeen, something like that. Did a really good job. Remember, he's a pharmacist, sorry. So, when it comes to science and talking about the evolution theory, I don't think anybody did a good job as his good job, because he goes all the way to the journals and he would tell you this is what that journal is, and he would explain and break it down. And there's a really good subtitle there. He does have some videos that he does speak in English and about some topics. His English is not, I mean, it's really good, but I guess the accent sometimes, I know some people might complain about my accent too, but am I being discriminated here? Prejudice, sorry, don't mean to be prejudiced, but yeah, sometimes some people might find it hard to understand. His accent just takes time, and yes, definitely worth, I guess it's not an issue of letting people, change their accent. I would say, hey, learn how to modify the way that you would hear how the letters sound out. So basically, don't have a prejudiced ear listening to people with different accents, and definitely, put in the effort to seek ilm, and of course, be humble to seek ilm. And definitely with an expert like that, we definitely are lucky to have during our time somebody that smart. Let's see. She says, if a woman realizes that marriage has become obligatory for her, oh dear, what did I just do? Obligatory for her, and she fell into mistakes. She tried her best, but in vain. What should she do? Although she observes fasting and other acts of worship, matters still goes wrong. Let me answer that question tomorrow, because there are a number of different things to say about this one. Okay. And inshallah tomorrow, hopefully I'll remember to answer this question, because it's definitely requiring a lot of details. So yeah, but that's a very good question. That's a very important question. So inshallah, it's not tomorrow, it's the day after tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow is my day off. So the day after tomorrow, inshallah, stay tuned. And remember, we've got the resources, and Noura was telling me that I have to use, what is that called? Canva. And that we're going to be using Canva and making it available for you. But for those that are new, let me just tell you where these PowerPoints and these slides are available, and really easy to find access to. Even if somebody is like not excited to get into Canva, don't worry about it. We basically have it easy and available for you. Even if you don't have Canva, here it is. I'll basically let you see that. And let me share the website. Basically has all those slides that you will be finding. It's basically this one, okay? And this is the website. It was basically at the time they were called blogs, okay? Unfortunately, I lost the password and lost the email, and now I can't correct it. But that was my old, I don't know, look at that. That was 2009. So what, 15 years ago? Long time ago. Okay, well, let me see, April 12, 2009. Man, that was, my daughter was born October 17, 2009. Wow, that was when I was pregnant with my baby. Okay, wow, just imagine that. Okay, so here we go. You go Fiqh of worship, and here we go. You basically scroll all the way down. Where is it? Oh, no. This is Fiqh of marriage. Oh, man. Okay, hold on. Fiqh of marriage, family fiqh. Okay, you're going to go family fiqh, and you're going to go all the way down. I know someone was scribbling on my screen, but let's erase that one. Okay, hold on, we're going to do it. Okay, here we go. Okay, you're going to go all the way down. You see these ones? Those are basically all the slides. Intro to marriage and all of that. You basically click on it, and then a little pop-up thing comes out, and then you say, okay, download on this file, and you will basically have access to all the slides. So even if you were not part of Canva, so you would have access to all the slides, plus it would be really good if you basically, struggle with family, with introduction to fiqh, some terms and all of that. Introduction to fiqh basically has something really similar, and we basically have certain references that would be very helpful for you to basically learn about basically Islam and, let's say, family fiqh. Oh, those are actually the slides. Those are the slides for Islamic law and family, introduction to law and Islamic law. So definitely get to that. I wish I had, a way to go and, edit some things here, but it's not allowing me. Okay, this is it. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت. الله يحفظكم يا ربي. Sorry, everybody, if sometimes you gotta bear with me. I know sometimes I get off track. Just a little thing about my history, okay? At one point, I would say, a very feminist mindset, okay? And now you can see it's hard to classify me. You could see when I was explaining Inna Allah kana aliyan kabira, and I was explaining, you would be like, okay, this is a person that is a misogynist, but then, sorry, not a misogynist, but a person that is pro-women, etc. I'm not pro-women or pro-men. I try as much as I can to stay away from these biases, and I try as much as I can to not necessarily, speak the breath of a woman or speak the breath of a man, but I try as much as I can to, let's say, speak the word of the Quran and Sunnah. As much as I can, I try to do that. I know sometimes I may say certain things that may provoke somebody, and some people would be like, okay, I don't like the way you worded it. Remember, طلب العلم needs sabr. Even if you may not like your shaykh or your shaykha, and you may not like the method that they may say things in, remember, طلب العلم needs sabr. You don't have to agree with everything I say, especially if we're talking about something that may be relative, something that may be of a personal experience or anything like that. You can disagree with me on that. That's absolutely fine. Okay. Or you can say, I have a better way of saying things. Perhaps you may have a better way of saying things. I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, learning fiqh, take the good from the shaykh or the shaykha. And if you disagree with them on certain matters, don't just, I don't like the way that they say things, and lose the ilm in it. Take the ilm, and if you find any shortcomings, disregard it and just pretend you can't hear it, and be patient on my shortcomings. I know there are certain times that you may just say, I hate the way she says it. That's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. There were some shuyukh that I really hated the way they say things, but then I had to be patient. I had to be patient with a lot of my shuyukh, even though I may have hated their attitudes, but trust me, they had a lot of ilm, and you don't have to love everything about your shaykh or shaykha, but at least you gotta remember that even your professors at school, you may hate their attitude, but you still got to take the class, and you got to be patient the same way. You may hate some things that in the way that I might word it. I've had people say, you come in as misogynist. I've had people say you come in as anti-men, and I've had people tell me, contradictory statements, but at the end of the day, I try as much as I can to present fiqh without all the additions, but I find myself basically needing to sometimes, I guess, as a person that was a feminist thinking at one point in her life, and right now I'm going to be 46 years old, I would love to share, because of my love, wallahi, because of my love to these girls, that I know most of the people that are attending family fiqh, they're either not married or they're married. Well, of course, it's either going to be this or that, but very few are probably, the marriage idea is not even something they're thinking of, but that's not the majority. The majority is they're either in this institution or they're about to get into this institution, but very few are like, you know what, that's not even something that I'm interested in at all. Very few are like that. So therefore, when I say certain things, you know, as somebody that lived, I would say, the mindset of a feminist, and later on basically was living with professors that were very misogynist. So I try to put in both things, and I try to stick in to an objective reading for Quran and Sunnah and the fiqh. And sometimes when there is a misogynist view, I may actually say, well, actually, this view is not based on Quran and Sunnah, but more of a cultural influence from that particular society. I may actually expose that and say that, although some may not like that I would say that, but I think it's very important to go back and make sure that I'm getting, let me call it a Puritan, and I'm basically going back to the Quran and Sunnah as my reference, because there's no I don't know if I could use the word sanctity, but scholars are not infallible. But at the same time, they definitely deserve our appreciation. And even when we may disagree on what is called a takhrij, meaning we may disagree on the wording or probably the final conclusion that they had come to in fiqh, in how they read this or that statement, I wouldn't use myself to object to this faqih. Who am I to do that? But I would, and if I ever do that, do not take my words. But if I were to say, well, this scholar objected to this scholar in this way, and this is their evidence, that's when you would say, I'll take that. Because I am not at the level of mujtahid to be at the level where I can object on Abu Hanifa or object on Shafi'i. I'm not at that level. And we have to understand that when we object on a scholar, we would have to take another scholar's endorsement for the objection, because they had the ilm to basically say, yes, this objection is endorsed or is approved by 1, 2, 3 evidence, by 1, 2, 3 scholars that approve this objection. But if I would ever come in and say, here's what I'm objecting to, so I'm going to say, wait a minute, here's what? You are talibat ilm. I am talibat ilm. Yes, maybe, you know, studied at a certain level, etc. But I'm still a talibat ilm, and I'm still not near, not even close to the طلاب العلم of Shafi'i and Abu Hanifa, let alone Shafi'i himself. Okay, so just wanted to make that one clear. So when I would sometimes come up with probably a word or an advice or my take on certain matters, etc., you know, it's okay. You know, be patient with me, please. And I am just, wallahi, from a person that is really caring for the girls and wanting them to live the best of their life. And this is it. Allah barik fiki ya Rabbi. And Jazakallah khairan, Maryam. She said, we recognize the wisdom behind it, even if we may feel uncomfortable. We know that you will explain it and answer our questions. Allah yahfadhku ya Rabbi. You know, I'm a woman like you. I definitely hate misogyny, and absolutely hate it, and definitely recognize that a lot of women were abused and were victims of a lot of different, whether narcissist or many are abusing women and the lack of resources that they might have, etc. I recognize all of that, but at the same time, sometimes it's important to say that victims may sometimes be the ones to drag their oppressors to giving them the keys to their oppression. Ladies, please pay attention to this one. This is not spanking the victim, but this is to tell the victim, before you start crying about why you are a victim, you need to learn the techniques of empowering yourself. Before you end up being an easy access to those narcissist abusers, to whatever, you need to learn those borders to make sure that you do not drag, and you don't become appealing to those narcissists that are looking to basically find people like you to feed their ego. So that's what I'm trying to do. Sometimes you really need to tell the victim, listen, here are your shortcomings. Here's what you fail in. Here's what I want you to work on. This is what I mean by that. Here's what I want you to work on. Ladies, you lack 1, 2, 3. I'm not telling it to you because somehow I hate you. I would hate self-hating if I hated you. But this is what I acknowledge in myself before I tell you and I call you out for it. I'm acknowledging that it's in me too. I'm a woman like you, okay? I'm a woman like you. So I'm letting you just know we have this. Sometimes I may say science proves, and sometimes I may say, hey, go to this podcast and listen to this expert talking about it, etc. But, I would just let the victim, or at least I'm not presupposing or, putting on the premise that a woman is a victim, but I'm just, trying to, of course, feminism is coming with the premise that women are victim. And I'm here coming with the premise that women are more vulnerable. There's no doubt and no question about it. And Islam came in with the Sharia to basically bring justice to those that are more vulnerable. To those that are more vulnerable. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, hey, men, this is what I want from you. Ladies, this is what I want from you. This is how you were created. Because I don't want the victims to be an easy access, especially in a society right now that is living in Shari'at al-Ghab, in the Sharia of nothing but a jungle. So, yeah. Allah Rabbi yahfadku jami'an. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve you. Rabbi yahfadku jami'an. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring you happy marriages, make you good wives, make your husbands good husbands, and make your children be pious children. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma ameen. Allahumma ameen. Nothing like, ladies, wallahi al-azim, there is nothing like romance. What do I mean by that? Nothing more beautiful than having a good relationship with your husband and living in a marriage bond where you both understand each other and you both basically work towards making this family work out to Jannah. That's why even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Udkhulul jannata antum wa azwajukum tuhbarun." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considered that one of the most beautiful things, "Udkhulul jannata antum wa azwajukum tuhbarun." Enter Jannah, you and your spouses and your children, basically. But antum wa azwajukum. Why? Because you might think that, yeah, the man doesn't care about me, trust me. Men don't know how to express love. in the way that you might want to express it. You want to express love in certain words and certain probably physical touching, etc. Men express it differently. They express it in action differently. And subhanAllah, it's a completely different thing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know. Why would he say, Antum wa azwajukum? It's to let us know that even a man, when he wants to enter Jannah, the one that he finds dear to him is his own spouse, is his own wife. And the same thing. To you, when you enter Jannah, the first thing you want to look for is really your husband. They lived, or he lived with you as basically that ishra and marriage and romance and all of that. You know, they would picture romance as if it's, you know, flowers and I don't know, this goose thing on the bed and all of that, and a time to go to the Maldives and, you know, and basically their feet next to each other and a picture. That's fake. That's superficial. True love is when you are willing, no matter what it takes, to sacrifice for him and him sacrifice for you. When you are willing to compromise your need for his need and his need for your need, that's true love. When we're willing to basically support one another during our moments of weakness and during our moments of shortcomings, or moments of when we probably got angry, when we did something stupid, or etc. And then we'll be patient. We'll talk about this later. And then we'll come in and say, listen, I love you. And you know that you are dear to me. But here's what I didn't like. And here's what I would expect from you, etc. What are you doing? What is he doing? He's also acknowledging that you're probably going into a moment of, I don't know, getting close to your period, 2 days prior to your period. Hey, you're getting all these hormones. And then he's coming in, it's like, yeah, he's probably just going through that. That's not her. But yeah, just going through these moments. And same thing, he lost his job and he's just basically going out there, and you're like acknowledging that this is a moment that I have to come in as the hero without a cape. I have to come in to basically save his moment of anxiety and be the one to show him or show her the support that they mean more to me than anything, and that I'm willing to be patient. This is it. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت. Topic about marriage is interesting. Hope you can explain it in Arabic language. If I had enough people, I would do it. Yes, inshallah. You know, sometimes I guess I've been, you know, speaking and doing all these lectures in English for what, right now, 23 years actually. So I find myself, I guess, getting dragged into the English language, and then, but I think I can do it in Arabic. I can do it. I promise you, I can do it. Inshallah. Hunna libasun lakum wa antum libasun lahun. Absolutely. They're the garments to you, and you're a garment to them. And what does a garment do? A garment carries warmth. A garment carries covering. A garment carries the closeness. You know, when you wear something, it carries a lot of things underneath it. And certainly, you know, there was this lecturer, I think he was Syrian. He was talking about a very beautiful way of talking about hunna libasun lakum, and what a garment really carries with it. A closeness to the body, and warmth, and all of those different things. And hopefully, inshallah, I can, you know, I'll listen to it again. And I may not be able to word it the way he worded it. SubhanAllah, you know, you can word something and you can listen to something, but SubhanAllah, sometimes people have just a beautiful way of putting things. Just like Ratib al-Nabilsi, one of my favorite scholars, and the method that he speaks in. I definitely, even if I were to speak in Arabic, man, I can't compete with that guy. Ratib al-Nabilsi, I can never compete with him. Outstanding. Outstanding. All right. If there's anything else,
We are waiting for the Arabic classes.
there you go. There you go. That's it. That's it.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Inshallah. So this is it. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik.